let's just talk about these diplomatic visits. We didn't know about the Foreign Secretary visiting. Of course, Antony Blinken is visiting today. How important is this, do you think, this international show of solidarity diplomatically with Israel?
Well, I think the Israelis appreciate it because this has been the most devastating attack on Israel since the history of Palestine. I can't remember any attack that was more vicious than this one. So they're quite stunned, and I think they feel, they expected the United States to be up front in their support. But I think that if you ask many Israelis, I think some of them would be surprised that the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom has seen fit to come at this time to visit Israel. So I think it is much appreciated.
Of course, the UK, along with America, has lost a number of citizens, so that may also be informing his decision to go. Why do you think Hamas launched this attack on Saturday? What do you think they're trying to achieve?
Well, that's number one. They're trying to say, hey, we exist. You can't ignore us. Israel's security establishment had pretty much ignored Hamas as a real factor, and that's why they had undermanned the borders and shifted their personnel to the north or to the West Bank, where they thought there was greater threats. So, number one, they want to say, we exist. And I think, number two, they really wanted to hit Israel when they saw Israel was very vulnerable. Israel was divided by this judicial reform, and Israel was quite vulnerable, and so they saw this as an opportunity to hit a very complacent enemy, just like they did 50 years ago to the day at the beginning of the Yom Kippur War, when the Egyptians surprised the Israelis at the Suez Canal.
Mm-hmm. What do you think Israel should do? How do you think it should respond?
Well, what I think they should do is not relevant. As an analyst, I try to look at what is likely to happen. And I think what is probably going to happen is that Israel will try to somehow diminish this Hamas in such a way that they can never do this kind of operation again. And I think that may involve an occupation, but that has complications because, all these hostages of Israelis are being held in Gaza. And B, it's very costly to occupy. Maybe what Israel will do is try to create a security zone of a few kilometers inside of Gaza, maybe a kilometer, I don't know, to try to get more protection. But that would still leave Hamas unless they can attack just from the air, which I don't know whether that works. So I don't know how it's going to play out, but I do know that the Israeli public wants to see decisive action given what's been done to their people. I mean, the casualty toll is equivalent to hundreds of thousands of Americans killed relative to the small population of Israel.
Indeed. And we saw greater activity on the northern border from both Syria and Lebanon overnight. What do you make of what's happening there, the fact that Israel potentially is going to have to defend itself on a number of fronts?
Yeah, I'm very concerned about the northern border. As your viewers may know, Iran and Hezbollah have worked very closely with this Hamas group, this group of 4 or 5 leaders who planned this attack. The Iranians and Hezbollah were more than just supporters. They were active partners in this attack, and that will come out in the coming days, I'm sure. So the question is, if Hamas agreed to do this attack, it's probably likely that Hamas was told that if you are occupied by Israel, if Israel invades Hamas and tries to eliminate Hamas, we, Hezbollah, will open a second front for you in the north. And so these rocket attacks may be the beginning of that second front. I hope it doesn't happen. And I think that, Hezbollah knows that Israel is ready for them now. There's no surprise anymore. So it could go either way, but I am very concerned about escalation because once it escalates with those powerful, precise missiles that Hezbollah has, 100,000 missiles, but many of thousands of them are very precise. They could cause a lot of damage to Israelis in Tel Aviv and elsewhere, and that would just create more escalation from the other side, and then you really have a regional war.
Well, on the subject of that diplomacy and potentially what's happening to de-escalate behind the scenes, just dropped that the German foreign minister has said that Qatar needs to play a crucial role in freeing Gaza hostages. We know that there are meetings today between the Germans and the Qataris. I mean, do you think that there is any possibility of intervention from the Qataris and what is going on behind the scenes to create some kind of humanitarian corridor to get people out?
Well, there's two things. One is, can Qatar help get the Israeli hostages out of Gaza in exchange for, I assume, the release of similar prisoners in Israeli prisons? And I think that is something Qatar could help on. Whether Hamas agrees is another question. The second question, though, is whether Hamas can be really an honest broker. Your previous reporter pointed out that Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, is living in Doha. So to say that, Qatar made a very pro-Hamas statement at the beginning of the war. So given what's happened and all the atrocities, I don't think Israelis or the Americans, for that matter, are very enthusiastic about Qatar right now. So they're kind of the bad boy here. We'll see what happens, though. If they can deliver on the hostages, that might help. That might help Qatar.
Interesting stuff. Jonathan Paris,
You're welcome.
Security and Middle East analyst. Very good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.